All right, so apologies, we got cut off. So let's take a look here. We're still talking about our independent and dependent. Independent talks about the input, the domain. That is talking about all of your x values. The output, the range, that is talking about your y values. And then when we talk about this equation, we're talking about the dependent variable y in terms of the independent variable x. So understand this is our dependent variable, and this is our independent variable. So as we go through here, that's what's really going to think about. Think about what is depending on the other one and which one can stand alone. So here's our first example. We're talking about the function of a equals negative 4b plus 14, and this represents the number of a avocados. So a is talking about the number of avocados that we have left after making b batches of guacamole. So I have to think about what can stand alone. What is my independent variable and what depends on the other one? So if I'm thinking about this, avocados, does that stand alone, or is that the one that depends on the other one? Or is it the b batches of guacamole that depends on how many avocados you have? And that's the truth. Depending on how many avocados we have is the number of batches of guacamole that I can make. So as I'm looking at this b, this is the independent variable. That's going to stand alone. My a is my dependent variable, or my avocados, because that is the one that depends on the batches of guacamole that you want to make. So again, if you kind of want to remember, that was that equation. And that means every time that I'm making a batch of guacamole, I'm using 4 of the avocados that I have. Eventually, I'm going to run out of avocados because I only have 14 avocados to begin with. So eventually, I'm going to run out of this. So my independent and my dependent variable here, my independent variable, the one thing that can stand alone, that's the guacamole. That's the batches here. And then my dependent variable, the one that depends on the other one, my dependent one is my avocados. So when we talk about our domain or our x values here, we're talking about 0, 1, 2, 3. We need to figure out what is the range of those. And if remember, these are talking about our x values, and we're given an equation which we know that our x values are representing the b value. I could actually plug this in and figure this out. So when I plug in, let's do blue. When I plug in having 0 batches of guacamole, how many, thinking about this, we're going to make a table up here. If I make 0 batches of guacamole, how many avocados do I have left? Well, I can show that. A avocados, meaning negative 4 times 0 plus 14, which I end up with 14. So I had 14 avocados to start out with. Looking here, if I make 1 batch of guacamole, how many avocados do I have then? Plugging in, negative 4 times 1 plus 14. Well, negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 plus 14, and I end up with 10. If I make 2 batches of guacamole, how many avocados do I have left from that? I have 6. If I make 3 batches of guacamole, how many avocados do I have left of that? I'm talking about, and I can even plug it in. So that's the best part about this. You can plug it in, which is negative 12 plus 14, which gets me 2. I've got 2 avocados left. Can I make another batch? I can't make another batch because I need 4 avocados to begin with, and I'm only left with 2 avocados left after 3 batches. So when we talk about our range, we talk about having 14 avocados, 10 avocados, 6 avocados, and then 2 avocados. And that's it. That's as low as I can go. So there's that one. Let's look at another one. So here we're talking about our temperature. So as I'm looking at this, it's talking about the temperature equals 90 or 19M plus 36 represents the temperature of T in degrees Fahrenheit of the oven after preheating for M minutes. So M is talking about my minutes and T is talking about the temperature that the oven is. Well, again, if I'm looking at this, your X values are always going to be associated with your independent variable. So my independent variable here is the minutes of preheating. That is something that can stand alone. That doesn't really matter. It's standing alone. This is what I'm talking about. So this is minutes. And then we talk about our dependent variable. Well, the temperature depends on how long the oven has been preheating for. So that is my dependent variable. That's what's going to be the temperature depends on how many minutes it's going to be on, the oven's on. So as I'm looking at this, we need to recall that an oven, a recipe recalls for an oven temperature to be 350 degrees. We need to describe the domain and the range of this function. So as I'm looking at this, the domain and the range. The domain again talks about our X values and the range talks about our Y values. So the oven temperature that I want is 350 degrees. So I'm going to plug that in for what I know that to be, which is my Y value or the T, and I'm going to figure out what I'm working with. So 350 equals 19M plus 65. This 65, that's talking about what the temperature is starting at. This is the starting temperature. That's the starting temperature. That is what the room temperature. So that's what our oven is starting at. And then I'm going to solve it like an equation. So I'm going to subtract 65 and I'm going to subtract 65. So I have 350 minus 65 and I end up with 285 equals 19M and divide by 19 and I equal M equals 15. So it's going to take 15 minutes for our oven to reach 350 degrees. Do I need to go anything past that? No, I don't need to go anything past that because that's the maximum temperature that I need it to reach. So when we talk about the domain, we were solving for our M, which remember that is our independent variable or our X value. The domain, bring that over here. The maximum amount of minutes that it needs to go on for is 15. So less than, there you go. And we're talking about our X. So X can be less than or equal to 15. Well, what's the starting point? If I'm not starting my oven, however many minutes it's going to start, at 65 degrees, it's going to be 0 minutes. So my oven, in order to get to 350 degrees, it needs to stay on for between 0 to 15 minutes in order to reach the 350 degrees. That's that domain. That's that, the numbers that it can go through. Those are the domain values or the X values. So the opposite of that is talking about the range or how our temperature is going to be increasing. So after 0 minutes, what is the temperature of that? After 1 minute, what is the temperature of that? That's what we need to find there. Well, we already know that our range is talking about the highest temperature it needs to be is 350 degrees. So 350 degrees is the highest that needs to be. So that is our Y value. And then we're going to talk about our, what it's going to start with. Well, if I'm talking about a 0 starting point over here for my independent variable, I can plug that in to my equation and figure out what is the temperature that it started with. So I need to find the range or that dependent variable, which we already established was T. So when I plug that in, I want to solve for T, but I want to solve after 0 minutes and 65. This becomes 0 plus 65, so T equals 65 degrees. That means that the temperature was starting at 65 degrees. So my range is going to be from 65 degrees all the way up to 350 degrees. That's where we're going. This, again, is talking about the minutes. This is talking about the temperature that my oven is. So it is tricky, but You just have to keep putting forth that effort and keep trying this. If you have finished this and you have completed all of these problems and shown all of the work, then you can go and show your paper to Miss Herman for the homework. Tomorrow we'll talk about questions and we'll go a little bit further from here. So I hope that you are having a good time with this awesome video, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a great night, guys.